Okay, so the next album that we're going to look at is by a band named Stavesacre, who is a group in the, I guess, the late 90s that came together specifically out of several other Christian bands from back in the day. And this album, I want to say it came out, I'm not sure. Do y'all know what year it came out in?
97.
Yeah.
1997.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a terribly long album, and I think it's maybe a little bit different from the last album that I gave. So I'm looking forward to hearing you guys, your thoughts and perspectives. So off you go.
So, first impressions. I don't know that much about heavy metal music. I wouldn't call this heavy metal music. I would call it hard rock.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you would call it, but
This would be probably kind of a mix between like hardcore and like maybe kind of a little bit of punk twisted in, but it would mostly be like in the broader genre be called alternative rock, basically.
I felt like because it was hard rock from 1997, I don't listen to a lot of hard rock. Musically, I had a lot harder time connecting to it because of the way hard rock has kind of, I don't know if I want to use the word dissonance, but it has, with the beats that it has dissonance, so that it's not as melodic, so to speak, I would say, as music that I'm more familiar with. But that's the purpose of this type of music. It's supposed to be dissonant.
Yeah.
So I recognize that. I also I really appreciate the album lyrically. I think it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, it is.
Just talking to Jay about the Generation X, hearing about the rebellion, the danger, the resistance to the boomers and the security of the American life, and then hearing this album from 1997 when the 90s was a time of more prosperity and seemingly was more peaceful, and people were unsatisfied with that, I suppose. And having read some of the book by Solomon, forget the title of the book, but Simplicity. Read some of that, read some of this guy's experience. I can see lyrically where he's coming from, spiritually where he's coming from. I found it very powerful. I can talk more about details like lyrically later. As far as musically goes, I felt like, well, I'll get into musical later, but I thought it was really reflective of its time and generationally, and some of the images of the lyrics are just really, really powerful.
Yeah, I felt like I was in my car in Atlanta in high school listening to Atlanta's alternative again. Like Radio 105.7 was what was often on in my car. And it's a mix of anything from 90s to 2000s to like early 2010s alternative rock music and like different punk music and stuff like that. And it fit right in with that. And so never in my life have I heard a Christian group fit in that genre. So I just haven't explored that at all or heard that, and I loved it, that it fit right in. Now I haven't listened to a ton of specifically like I mean, yes, alternative music as an umbrella, but like specifically more hard rock that this was. So I will say, like musically, I didn't even necessarily know like what to look for or what to think about, just comparing it to other experiences because I hadn't really listened to a ton of it. But lyrically, more than anything else, I was distracted by the lyrics from listening to the music because, like Joseph said, it's brilliant lyrically. And I mean, I've written down a whole bunch of different lyrics from the album that I really, really like. And so I was almost always paying more attention to what was being said than the actual music surrounding it, just because I was like, this is great. Like they are really, really tapping into something about the human experience that I feel, that I understand, that I know. After I listened to the album, I sent the album to a couple friends back home, and my cousin, he was even like, is this a joke? Like what did you just send me? I was like, I promise you, just like listen to it, please. And he's like, okay. And he hasn't gotten back to me yet, but it was kind of funny just to see like the lyric or the genre jump of like what my friends and I might be used to listening to compared to what it was initially on the first song, Shiv, and then for the rest of the album. But yeah, first impressions, I was really surprised. I thought it was going to be really shallow lyrically. I thought like, okay, this is going to be like music to work out to, kind of just like rage music. But I sat down and read all the lyrics, and I was just so surprised, and completely blown away. So yeah, great first impressions all around.
Yeah, for me, whenever I listen to the music, like once again, I feel more strongly about the lyrics than I do about the music. Mm-hmm. But I guess maybe this is a generational thing. But for me, it's like the music just drives the lyrics home. Like they seem to match to me that bit of angst and desire for something else. Just kind of melds into this one product that is this album and several others. And it seems to me that the strong words match also the really strong, powerful music.
Yeah.
And I would say partially I feel strongly about the music too, because I listen to these, because the opposite of you, I listen to this type of music, both secular and Christian. Okay. And like the secular version was usually better, significantly better, more well produced, a lot tighter. The band was tighter. The musicians were just generally better. And then you'd listen to the Christian version of it, and oftentimes it wouldn't be terrible, but it would be a step down. But like musically, both as far as the vocalists as well as the musicians, these guys were at the same level of quality as all the other guys, and that's why all of us like loved it. We were just like, wait a minute, like this is legit. This isn't that kind of watered down Christian version. Like this is real music. And so I think that kind of helped to drive it, for me and some of my friends.
Yeah, so I just want to dive right in to like one of the things I really loved about the song. Talking about lyrically and musically, Joseph, you and I have talked about Wither, Ascend, like that sort of dual song right in the middle of the album. My favorite personally is Acquiesce, which is right after that. But the way that song even musically transitions, the intro is almost like tin canny sort of, but then I love the transition from that sort of tin can effect to actual like full instrumentation, and then they added distortion and all this different stuff. But then halfway through the song, the vocals change, and it's a completely different vocal style as well. And it honestly reminded me of REM a little bit in like the vocal sound. But yeah, I noticed musically, even though I wasn't necessarily listening to all the lead guitar parts, the bass lines and stuff like that, I noticed musically like they're telling a story in this album. And I caught it on that song on my first listen through, and I was like, okay, when I listen to that album again in the future, I need to see what they're doing musically and lyrically to tell a story. And they continued with it, and really I saw it begin in the second song, Sand Dollar, and then I saw it continue throughout. Wither and Ascend had a very strong like forward motion of different themes that they had kind of surrounding this idea in Sand Dollar, that is the imagery or metaphor of a sand dollar dying to become something beautiful. It's a live organism, right? But then you find it on the beach and it's dried out and dead, but it looks beautiful. Everyone loves looking at them. They're like, this is so cool. And they pick them up and collect them, right? And so in a similar way that they're furthering that like lyrical narrative throughout, and it all parallels with the experience of the gospel, of dying and being given new life, of in death something beautiful arises in Christ. And so, but musically they match that, and so that you had themes from different songs reappearing as a lyric reawoken that theme. And I really admired how musically they were able to do that as they went through the album.
Musically, like I said, I had trouble most of the time with the dissonance. The really heavy dun dun dun, and you'd go high, and then you'd go low with the drum beats. They had a number of background guitars. There was a few bass guitars, but electric guitars as well, where they had really powerful strumming that I thought in the background really accentuated the songs. And then the choruses, almost all the choruses, I really loved the choruses. It's probably just because it's more what I'm familiar with, what I'm understanding. but they entered into just a different melodic type of musical style. I thought that there was a different use of vibrato and staccato throughout the album that I found really interesting. There were a few moments where I thought the vibrato was odd and maybe ineffective, particularly in Sand Dollar. But the staccato, there's several times where they use staccato throughout that I think is really effective for what they're trying to do, which is they're trying to shock people in a good way. They're trying to break things that need to be broken, and things that they see are ineffective, things that they see are irreproducible, things that are wasteful. We want to break these. It's this kind of smashing idea that the dissonance really conveys, and I can respect that, even though I don't quite, understand it from my background. I thought that Matthew's favorite song was Acquiesce. I'm convinced that this is the most powerful song lyrically on the album. It wasn't my favorite one, but I listened to it and read the lyrics, and I found the lyrics really, really powerful. Laying bare my soul, it's a reference to what is man that you are mindful of him, reference to the Psalms, can I make it through the wilderness? Another one that I felt powerful, connected to Colt 45. I just Sand Dollar. I have on my notes, I put a fascinating understanding of what it means to live as a human in an adult world where damage is done and one doesn't know how to redeem it. I felt that's a theme throughout the whole album, is there is so much damage here, and it's not hopeless, it's not nihilism, but there's some serious wrongs that are going through this system.
And I think that the cool thing about the album too that I loved was that it wasn't a pointing of fingers either.
Yeah.
It was inward. He was saying, he was recognizing there are wrongs there, but he was also saying, I'm part of the problem. I've lost my own way. It's not like I was misdirected or misguided. I chose this path.
Yeah.
But then also finding that redemption of knowing that that's not the end of the story. Just because I screwed up doesn't mean that it's all over,
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons I feel like it resonates also with me, is because, especially during those years, I stumbled a lot. I stumbled so much just trying to find my way, because I had this deep desire in my heart to follow God with everything that I was. Everything that I was, I wanted it to be about Him. But yet you'd find yourself in a situation and you come home on a Saturday night and you're like, yeah, I didn't live up to what I say my desire is. Now what? And I feel like that's one of the things and I've always said that this album, whenever I feel like myself straying from the path, whether it be intellectually, in sin or laziness, whatever it may be, that this album always brings me back. It reminds me, hey, it's not the end. You screwed up. No big deal. Get back out there and let's do right.
Yeah. And lyrically, it's powerful enough to convict you to get there, and musically, it's powerful enough to pump you up to live it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I see that. I remember you said this was your Journeyman album.
Yeah.
This was when you were in Peru and stuff, and we're asking all these questions, and that's where I am. That's where we are. That's the program we're even doing right now. And so you kind of laughed, and you were like, I wonder how this is gonna reach you since you're in the same stage of life, And other albums we've talked about previously, it's impacted one of us, but not all of us. We were wondering, is it stage of life? Is it something unique in the artist's creative moment, that God was doing in their hearts that makes this impactful?
Yeah, that we benefit from.
Yeah. And so, for me, I think again, it's both. Stage of life is important, and God working in the artist's heart is important. But I think here there's something unique about what they wrote specifically.
I agree.
And I think it transcends just season of life, because I'm in my early 20s, and I'm in the stage of life that you were when you first found this album and would listen to it. But to me, it communicates something that transcends that. That's something deeper than that and bigger than that, and because it's so experientially true. And over again, there are these questions I was writing in my notes that was making me think of, like, who am I going to be? What am I going to do? What do we do with doubt? How do we deal with doubt? Questions of what do we do with temptation? What do we do with sin in our life that we have done? What do we do with the consequences of past sin that we have to deal with now? And so those are universal things. You know, it's not just like, in this one time in my life, maybe it would be helpful. These are things that people need to, that believers must reflect on and process with the Lord daily, you know? And so, I really do think there was something special going on. And what's his name? Mark Solomon, in his life and the band's life at that time.
So I do think that Acquiesce is the most powerful song lyrically. My favorite was Wither Ascend, and that combined with its twin, the Wither Reprise. I thought those were just really powerful. Now Wither Ascend, both of them, but I listened to the first, the first four, and then Wither Ascend is the fifth, if I'm right. And the first four, I was like, okay, this is good, I can see this. And then I listened to Wither Ascend, and especially when you get to the second half of the song, I was really sold. Because I love the build-up musically, and the combination of that is inviting the listener upward. It's called ascend. So it's like you're being invited into heaven after you have already withered. It's this really beautiful crucifixion, waiting, resurrection imagery. And then with Wither Reprise, there's sadness that lingers from past sin. There's the questioning of, is there going to be healing? I don't know. Am I seeking annihilation? Should I seek annihilation? What does that mean? And it's echoing Wither Ascend. And so talking about the broken man, wrap me tight with this brand new skin. But it's simpler. It's more acoustic. And then there's a chorus of guitars that joins in onward. So I just thought that pair was really, really effective and powerful.
Yeah, and it even the idea of wither, like it all fits in this sand dollar imagery that they started early on in the album. It just continues. It continues musically, it continues lyrically. And in Acquiesce, there are some lines here. It says, burning clean has been both agony and absolute release. Can I hope to pass this test? Is my destiny the wilderness? The hardest part of letting go is trusting you with everything, and laying bare my soul is truly seeing who I really am. Father, what is man that you are mindful of him? And again, that burning clean has been both agony and absolute release. That is, I feel like, so descriptive of the human experience, of what it means to live in between, in the already and the not yet. That yes, I know the truth of Ephesians 2, that I've been raised up with him and seated with him in the heavenly places, right? That we have these promises to latch onto, that if anyone, and think 2 Corinthians 5, right? If anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. Behold, the old has passed away and the new has come. Those are true things, and yet we still deal with this temptation like the two heavens talks about. We still deal with this experience of withering, of our flesh being drawn to what is contrary to the Lord. And the experience that we have then is this burning clean, you know, of being refined as if through fire. And I imagine this sand dollar, this creature just lying on the sand of the shore underneath the hot sun, just burning, you know? And it's not hopeless. We're not nihilists, no. But that communicates something deep about the human experience that I feel I resonate with very deeply. And so...
Well, I think it's part of the hard teachings of Christ, too.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't understand what he was saying whenever he said, pick up your cross. Like, I guess maybe they, to some degree, were like, oh, he's being metaphorical, and he wasn't. Like, it wasn't necessarily that they were going to have to die on the cross, though many of them did, but it was that there is a death that goes along with this, and we like to kind of sugarcoat that and say, oh, but it's not really, you know. And that's, if you look at the Christian church today, that's what we see. We see this really difficult thing like death that has been covered with makeup to make it look like it's not really that bad. But what Jesus was trying to convey was, no, it's going to hurt, like it's painful, and it's going to strip you completely clean of everything that you think that you are. Yeah. And I think that's the reason that it resonates whenever Mark writes this, is because it is a reflection of what Christ taught. And that reflection is coming off of his own struggles in his own life, Yeah. And, having, watched this band and read about them and listened to all their albums, like I've seen that. I've seen the struggle. And, in reading of his book, you read about how real the struggle was and the fights that they were having interior, and just being really blunt and honest about, these are my struggles. But to me, that's the very thing that allows us to burn clean. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to get out of the ocean. That sand dollar has to leave the ocean. But I feel like that many Christians today, they stay in the ocean where it's comfortable and they think that they're alive, but really they're missing out on all these things. But like in his book, whenever he exposes some of the sin that he was involved in, he just lays it out there. Like, that is how you're cleansed from these things. You don't get sanctification without confession. Like, you have to basically say, I'm now ready to die. Like, I'm ready for that to be over. The good and the bad of it, I'm ready for it to all be over and put myself in your hands.
I'd like to read my response. I wrote a response after I finished listening to it. So I wrote, this album questions the human quest for life and struggles both with God and humanity in the angst of our existence on the earth. Motifs of this album include the sun as both light and heat that burns and destroys, city lights representing exhaustion, skin and peeling it away to bring something new, which may be a representation of something reptilian, maybe referencing something from the Bible regarding reptiles, struggling with sin and leaving behind what was previously enticing, the image of the broken man, deserts, air, and sky. There's almost a nuclear aspect to the atmosphere of this album. It isn't devoid of hope, but it seriously engages the pessimism derived of the 20th century and humanity's loss of hope therein. There is a questioning of the prosperity of the wicked and the call of God for justice upon the earth, even though humans have left behind standards of morality. There is also an ascending towards heaven and a sliver of hope for that ascent. There is desire for justice to descend on the earth and for humans to ascend to heaven. The band engages seriously with ash and the impact of death upon humanity and how that death informs humanity's relationship with God and with justice. The band acknowledges its limited presence upon the earth and desires life to represent the presence of God instead of that of humanity.
That's good.
So Jay, why was this album so impactful for you when you were my age?
I think that a lot of it had to do with the stage of life, like we had talked about before. And, up to this point, I was still kind of in that Christian world. I grew up in a Christian home and I went to a good church, and there were certain expectations on me. And I generally broke a lot of rules, but I stayed within most of the spiritual expectations. And when I went to college, of course, there was less supervision, but I was really, during that time in college, I was really driven to try to be a witness, to try to really reflect Christ in my life in a way that was different than what I saw my peers doing, which was back then like handing out tracts and preaching at people. And I just felt like that's not working. Like, I don't want to be a part of the problem. I want to do something different. And I would see those same people living their lives during the week very differently than what they were portraying. And I was just disgusted by it. So I'm like, okay, if God's called me to do something, then let me do it fully. And that's just always the way that I've been. Like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Like, I don't know if it's in this album or another album where he specifically is talking about he's my everything. I don't know if that's this album or the previous one. But like, if I'm going to follow Jesus, like, he's going to be everything to me. Like, that's going to be the main focus of my life. And I do feel like that in the first album, which was called Friction, it really dealt with a lot of the conflict. And I really resonated with that album as well, because I had long hair and tattoos, and I was always kind of on the edge of what was accepted by Christians. And I feel like I was able to push through that. I was able to kind of overcome it and say, listen, you can be a Christian and look different. You can be a Christian and whatever. But I feel like with this album, it took it to a whole nother level. It was like, forget about what people think about you. What does God think? And how do you interact with him? And like, it took me to this level of intimacy that was much deeper and much more realistic about my own sin and about my own walk with Christ. It wasn't like the platitudes that I would hear on Christian radio. This was like dealing with the real struggles that I have. And then once I got to the mission field, there's always an easy way out. Like, you can write good newsletters and make it seem like you're all doing great. But what I learned was, in order to really walk the path that he put before us, like, it's going to be really hard. And to keep your heart in the place that it needs to be, you're going to have to open it up and let him mold you and get rid of things and sanctify you and work through those issues. And you're going to have to confess it and deal with your sin nature. And so I feel like that like I said, partially because of the lyrics, but equally because of the music, it just would never let it go. You know, just whenever I would start to get lazy, I would go in. I had a little weight room about the same size as the one that we work out in now. And I would go in there, and all we had was a little bench. I'd put some weights on, and I'd put this music on to work out. And you'd find me crying in there, 20 minutes into my workout, because something that was said, the Lord used it to grab my heart and said, hey, are you listening to this, or are you just working out? Like, are you listening to me? And I'd repent, and I'd say, okay, I'm wrong. I need to change these things. And so, like I said, like, to this day, whenever I listen to this album before giving it to you guys, it brought a tear to my eyes, because it challenged me again. Do you really believe what you say you believe? If you do, it's going to resonate in everything that you are. It's not just going to be words. And so I feel like it just kind of helped to take me to a different level in my walk with Christ and my level of dedication to him. So that's why it was important to me.
That's good. Yeah. I also want to read one last little section of lyrics. It's in Sand Dollar. Some of what you were just saying kind of reminded me of those lyrics, and it's a verse and part of the chorus. He says, somehow, somewhere, I've lost a part of me. Got caught up in this twisted place and lost simplicity. The things I've seen have tainted everything. I think I gave up living. When life is stained, can it be cleaned? Want to know if I can set aright a life that's gone so wrong, and away start again, if not, what is left? If I could do it on my own, I'd have done it long ago. I'm sure that I have tried. The sun, the air, the faithful crashing waves remind me of a child that I'd love to be again. Only now finding comfort and peace and trusting in God. I'd even more that I might see, and even more than better days to trust again.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think for you guys and for anybody else who might be listening, follow up. I would say the first album, Friction, is also really good. I still think this is my favorite of all time. Then there's a follow-up album after this album, after Absolutes, called Speakeasy, and it's pretty good. They've done several albums, but those three are the ones that are really the most impactful for me, that I have such many memories with. And then there's the book that I recommended to you guys called Simplicity, written by Mark Solomon, that really gives a lot of good context as to where some of these songs came from. So if you want to follow up, that's the path.
Sweet.